we can be prosperous. This morning's message, I'm going to be speaking about prosperity, and Palma has already shared with you some of the things that I'm going to be speaking about. You know, in Christianity, sometimes we get the message in our more fundamental churches, we get the message that there's something wrong about being prosperous, that there's something beautiful and spiritual about being poor. And sometimes Christian churches use several sayings or teachings of Jesus. One in particular that I want to share, this is from Matthew, the 19th chapter of Matthew, verse 21. And this is when the rich young ruler comes to Jesus and asks, well, Master, what else do I need to do to experience eternal life? And Jesus tells him, you know, about all of the Mosaic code and that kind of thing. And he says, well, I've done all that stuff. What else? And Jesus says to him, if you want to be perfect, go, sell what you have, give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come and follow me. Well, we understand in Unity that Jesus is not saying that we need to be poor, but rather that we need to be free of our inner attachments to things, to outer things. Outer things are not prosperity. They are simply forms in which our prosperity may express. So Jesus never asked his disciples to go sell their fishing boats, their houses, their property, that kind of thing. All he said is leave those things because you won't need them while working with me. And if we follow the story toward the end of Matthew, when Jesus has been resurrected, he joins his disciples and they're out on the lake and fishing again, putting over their huge nets, okay, because this was their livelihood. So we know that they didn't sell their boats and businesses and things like that because they still had those things to go back to. But the idea of being prosperous is still kind of aloof for some people. And I find that it's important for us to realize that Jesus' whole reason for coming, which he states in John 10:10, is that we might have life, he says, and have it more abundantly. And that doesn't mean after we die, that means right now that we might have life and have this life abundantly. Well, the word abundant, if you look it up, it means something about the water flowing in waves, okay? And I like that idea of thinking of abundance and prosperity as our good flowing to us in waves. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore wrote that prosperity is, now this is a handful here, it is the consciousness of God as the abundant, everywhere present resource, unfailing, ready for all of us to open to it through faith. Fillmore wrote that whereas the material belief is that the possession of things is prosperity, he writes, spiritual prosperity is based on understanding that the inexhaustible, always present substance of spirit is the source of our supply and the fulfillment of all that we need, whether it's some physical need or some spiritual need. This is a mouthful. And here's how Unity Minister Eric Butterworth defines prosperity. He says, prosperity is spiritual well-being. Short and sweet. Well, what does that mean? How do we know whether we have spiritual well-being? I can think of a number of things that we would experience if we're having spiritual well-being. I think peace of mind. And right now, with all this going on in the world here, that peace of mind is very, very valuable. To know that God as life is within us and within all. And to know that this presence is guiding and directing doctors, nurses, scientists as they work on finding cures and different things that we need to get moved through this cycle here in the world. We can understand that that is a form of prosperity as well. Sometimes we get confused by thinking that our stuff is prosperity? Well, what we understand in Unity is that prosperity is not so much having the stuff, you know, this is great, okay, but having the idea that took this shape and form. Having the divine ideas, being able to, I like the idea, and I usually like grab an invisible divine idea from God, okay? Work with our spiritual faculties of imagination and faith, okay, and strength and power, and all of these others to shape that into the form of good that we need. You need a microphone? Okay, this was a divine idea, an invisible divine idea at one point, okay? So was this lectern, okay? So was everything that we see first an invisible divine idea that someone's mind grasped and someone's mind shaped and formed into what we see here, okay? And I understand that physicists can tell us that although this seems solid, it's really not, okay? There's zillions of particles floating around, okay, working together to shape this form that we call a lectern. Okay? So when we talk about prosperity here in Unity, we're talking about having this kind of understanding about things. And in that way, when things get lost, okay, like my glasses got lost a couple of weeks ago, when things get lost, when the mic doesn't work or whatever, okay, when we don't have those things, we're not feeling lost, okay, because our understanding of prosperity is not the thing, but the idea that took shape and form as the thing. So, as long as we're able to connect with that divine idea of whatever it is we deeply desire, okay, we have prosperity. Now, we have been given free will. We can choose which to shape and form in our experience. And we do this a lot unconsciously. And we say, oh, well, I didn't call that to myself, okay? I had nothing to do with that. But on further thought, we have something to do with everything that we experience. Sometimes we call to us opportunities for growth. That's what I like to call them. Works for me, okay? Because in essence, they are. I've shared before one of my favorite quotes by Richard Bach in his book Illusion, that problems come to us with a gift in their hand. And we seek those opportunities for growth because we want the gifts that those problems, challenges can bring us once we move through them. There are a lot of ways that we don't choose or that we don't claim our prosperity, our well-being. And in one of these ways, we are like circus elephants. In our lifetime, we had witnessed the demise of the circuses. Remember Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey circus? I used to watch those things on television. I'd never been to a real circus, but I remember seeing the big tent on TV and the lions and tigers doing their tricks, okay? And one of the most fascinating animals to me was the elephant. Huge, beautiful, gentle animal. And to the children, the elephant was probably most popular because at some of these circuses, children were allowed to ride on the back of the elephants, okay? I remember the trapeze artist where a person will be just flung out into and caught in midair above the heads of people attending the circus. And don't forget the tightrope act, okay? Where some brave soul would walk on the thinnest little wire above everyone's head. Now, granted, they had nets down there, and sometimes people fell from those things, okay? But there was the drama. Is he going to make it? Whatever. But we were amazed by the agility, the bravery of these folks who took these daring chances to entertain us. The elephant, however, strange. Some animal that huge and that powerful being held by a rope, a small rope around its ankle. And I remember hearing that someone once asked a trainer, how is it that the elephant as strong as it is, doesn't escape and just take off. It can tear those ropes. It's only one small rope around its leg binding it. And the trainer said, well, we start out when they are very young. And we use that same size rope that we have around the mature elephant. We start when they're small, they're young, and we use that rope to bind them by one leg. And at that time, because of their size and they're that young, that small rope can hold them and keep them from running away. He said what happens is, after that young elephant tries and tries to break free from that binding, and as that elephant grows, they use that same size rope to bind it into adulthood. The elephant has given up trying to break that because it believes that that small rope is binding it. And we know that its disbelief in its ability to break free is what's really binding the elephant. So, how much are we like the elephant when we allow negative thoughts, limiting thoughts, the belief systems of others, their attitude toward us, to bind us and keep us from being open to a greater experience and expression of life? How much like the elephant do we allow our fears of trying again when we've tried so many times before and felt failure to keep us from trying it anew now? Like the elephant, okay, this conditioning occurred when it was young, and it kept that condition on into adulthood. Sometimes we suffer the same way. We have picked up things as children, negative things about ourselves from our environment, our family network, social network, from media. We picked up negative things about ourselves that say perhaps we're not worthy, perhaps we're failures, okay? And sometimes we're not even aware that we still have some of these negative things in our child self. So a lot of people are finding benefit in doing work with their inner child to get in touch with these things and neutralize this negative energy. And so in this way, sometimes we are like these elephants, carrying on into our spiritual adulthood fears and the limitations that we took on or felt or experienced as children. We may be bound just as easily as these elephants by our limited or negative messages. Our binding, however, is not a rope. Our binding is our thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and the beliefs that we hold in our consciousness. And all of these can be changed if we are willing to work on our belief system. Here's another way to think of this. Did you ever watch that show called What Not to Wear? Okay. No, you're too young, okay. Okay. So I'm dating myself, everybody else too who watched that show. There was a woman designer named Tracy, and her partner or host on the show was Clinton. And this was an interesting show. Okay. I did enjoy watching it. What happened with this show is that family members or friends or co-workers would submit the names and pictures of those people in their lives who they thought would benefit from having a wardrobe change. Okay. They did this to help that individual. Like they would show, and they were kind of sneaky. They'd sneak around and get these pictures. Okay. Now, the one thing is that all the pictures were in the public view. And so these pictures were showing how the public saw each one of them. Now, I remember seeing shows where the women had on clothes that were too tight, too short, too hipster, okay? And in many ways, they didn't seem to add a professional look to a person in a professional field. And it was Tracy and Clinton's job to work with this person to help them understand the value of having the right kind of clothes for what they did for a living or for their social interactions. Okay. And what they had to, once the submissions were placed into the show, the, I guess, producers, whatever, they made selections about who could come on the show. And once that was made, they invited these individuals, okay, whom their family, their co-workers, their boss had selected, and people, they had to agree to come on the show and to allow Tracy and Clinton to throw out their clothes if they felt that those were what not to wear. Okay. And I remember that it got to be pretty emotional for some of these folks. Okay, they opened the show and they brought the rack of all of their clothes, okay, out there, and Tracy and Clinton, one by one, pulled one off the hanger, okay, and they would just throw it right in the get rid of bin, just like that, okay. And to some people, these were some of their cherished outfits. Some of the women even cried on the show. So it was kind of tough to watch, okay, but for a good cause. Tracy and Clinton were very kind, but this was part of the show. And they explained why this didn't work or why that didn't work to add a professionalism to the person. And the highlight, of course, is when they took the guests shopping. They gave them each a $500 certificate for new clothes. Now, $500 today, I don't think you get much. A couple of suits, and that's about it. Okay. Well, tell you, okay. Is that how old that show is? About? Oh my God! I was just a baby watching that show. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I have vivid memories of these women crying on stage. Okay, about them throwing away their treasured outfits. Okay. Anyway, they would give them this gift certificate for $500, and they'd take them into the shop, and they would let them just roam through and just grab whatever they wanted, try stuff on, and then they would say, well, this is why this outfit doesn't work for you. Okay, something like this other thing. Now, people had been wearing, sometimes people wore colorless kind of clothes, neutral colors all the time, and their co-workers felt that they would they'd feel better, they'd be more inspired if they chose some kind of color. So sometimes these guests would pull out the same old gray or tan things that they always wore, okay? And they were shocked when Tracy and Clinton would go and pull out, here, this bright fuchsia, okay? Try this on, okay? And it was a transformation for them, a transformation process. Okay? Now, what I realize is that, you know, the same thing goes on in us spiritually. When I'm speaking about clothes now or garments, I'm talking about what we clothe our consciousness with. The thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs that we take on that color us before the world. That teach the world how to see us. Our thoughts, attitudes, feelings, beliefs, all of that, okay? Which make up who we see, who we show ourselves to be in the world. So we are always clothing our consciousness with thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, feelings, okay? And if we are choosing to be prosperous, and we can be prosperous, in fact, we already are spiritually prosperous. But how do we get that spiritual prosperity out into shape and form in our experience? We do that with our thoughts. We do that with some of the tools that we have here in Unity for controlling our thoughts. We believe here in Unity the law of mind action is always working. It's a principle is like gravity. It always works, whether you believe it or not. If you're going to jump off of that 5-foot tall window, you're going to get hurt, okay? Because that's the law, okay? You can jump off of it knowing full well you're going to get hurt, okay? But a lot of us do these things unconsciously because we're not understanding that principle works all the time. Unity has 5 basic principles that I'm going to share with you today. And I'm going to focus on the last three because these principles, understanding them and working with them, this is how we can be prosperous in our lives. The first principle is there is one presence, one power in the universe and in our lives, God, the good. The second principle is our essence is of God. Therefore, we are all inherently good. The God essence called the Christ was fully expressed in Jesus. Principle number 3, we are co-creators with God. We create our own reality through our thoughts and beliefs. Principle number 4, through prayer and meditation, we align our heart-mind with God. Denials and affirmations are tools that we can use to help this process. And the 5th principle, it's not enough to know these truths, we must also practice them through prayer, meditation, and then in every thought, word, and action that we take in this outer expression or experience called life. I'm going to go back to principle 3. Now, the unity principles are, they are ideas formulated which seem to hold true no matter what. Now, in unity, we don't have any dogma that you have to accept. We don't have a statement of faith that you've got to believe certain things here. We believe God's presence in you is your guide, okay? And it shares with you, inspires you in ways to understand life. We have ideas that we have found to be helpful and we share them. And these 5 principles are those. Principle 3, we are co-creators with God. We create our own reality through our thoughts and beliefs. Now, because, as we say in unity, there's only one mind. Now, it does look like Tim has a mind, Palma has a mind, Natalia has a mind, Dave has a mind. Everyone has a mind. But we understand in unity that there is one mind of God. And our mind is a part of that. It's kind of like, well, the one cell in my elbow that thinks it's independent of the rest of my body, but it isn't, okay? It's part of me. So in that way, we are cells in the body of God. And our mind is part of God's mind. And this is how we understand in Genesis when the Bible says that we are created in the image and likeness of God. Because we partake of that. We are the drop in the ocean that has the same characteristics of the entire ocean, but it's just one facet of it. Now, that doesn't mean we are cookie cutter identities here. We have our own individual expression of the one mind, and we have our free will with what we're going to do with our mind, our ideas, our thoughts. Okay? And each of us are needed because the diamond has many facets, but it's not a diamond without all of the facets that belong to that diamond. We are co-creators with God. So because our minds are connected to the creative mind of God, we have the power to create, give shape and form to our experience. Other ways that this is expressed are thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. What you sow, you reap. Give, and you will receive in like kind. What we focus on expands. Therefore, if we want a life filled with love, we must intentionally extend love to others in the world. If we want peace of mind, we must make every opportunity to allow others to be at peace. If we want money for a vacation, perhaps we can look at ways that we can use the funds that we have to help someone else fulfill a dream that they have as well. Each of us is given the opportunity to decide what kind of clothes we're going to place in our mind. Judging others, criticizing others, seeing ourselves as victims, if we do that, we will experience a world where we are criticized and felt to be victims. fourth principle, through prayer meditation, we align our heart-mind of God with our heart-mind with God. Denials and affirmations are tools that we use. An affirmative prayer process is one of creative thinking. Unity understands that prayer meditation heighten our awareness of this presence of God in us, in other people, in life itself, so that we can consciously connect with that, feel that presence, and get in touch with it and allow it to express through us. Denials and affirmations are techniques we use. Some Unity denials are, there is no truth in evil, and there's no evil in truth. Pain and sickness cannot master me, for they're not lasting and eternal. There's nothing in all the universe for me to fear. That's a good one for us to be using now as denial. There's nothing in the universe for me to fear, because God is in the universe. There is no true lack or limitation in my life. Experiences of lack and limitation are not eternal or changeless. They are opportunities for growth. Denials create a vacuum in our mind which needs to be filled with something. So we fill it with a positive thought, like, I am a radiant center of divine love. I am a spiritual being living in a spiritual universe governed by spiritual laws. I like this one. I expect good, I accept good. I am open and receptive to God's living spirit of truth. I am free. I am unlimited. And the fifth principle says we got to apply these things in our lives. So we can change our attitudes. We can decide what clothes of mind we're going to wear every day. So tomorrow when you get up, what are you going to put on to wear? Remember what's not to wear. Okay? So choose something that makes you feel like you are a child of God, radiant and beloved. God bless you. And so, let's have a few moments of reflection.